Okay, so let's get started here. So I'll just quickly run through how you transfer 24 tracks or three tapes, three sets of ADATs that are in sync, that were recorded in sync previously using one ADAT and the MOTU 828 with the ADAT sync 9-pin connector. Which basically allows the computer software to follow the time code on the ADATs so that you can do 3 passes on your timeline, and they'll all line up perfectly when you're done. So here it is real quick. The 828 is down there, all hooked up with the 9-pin serial connector and the light pipe. I've got a tape all queued up. And once you install the drivers, you end up with this console, and if everything's running correctly, you'll end up with you'll see the sync, the clock source. You want to change that to 9-pin, ADAT 9-pin, and once you do that, you're all set. Then we can go ahead and can launch Cubase. Okay, so now that we're in Cubase, you open up your project, and basically the way that it shows up is that in your devices you'll have you have all your inputs and your outputs mapped. So what you do is you set up the inputs 1 through 8 to a bus. So you assign 8 buses, and over here I've got my my 8 buses, and each of these buses is set in the software to map to that sound card input. So you have tracks 1 through 8. Then over here I've got my 24 tracks lined up, and I just tell the first 8 to map individually to each bus. So track 1 is set to bus 1, track 2 set to bus 2, track 3 is set to track 3, and so on. And you can record enable the first 8 and turn the monitor on for the first 8. Then when I come down here and I play the ADAT, that starts playing, and you see you've got some output on the first 8 tracks. The time code also follows along as well to the ADAT because it's in sync. It says right here sync lock. So once you have sync lock, your cursor will follow along on the timeline wherever the tape is. Now if I zoom out, you'll see this. If I hit stop on the deck, the software also stops. You see up here it stopped. If I come down here, I hit play on the ADAT, the software follows along. So that's the whole point with the ADAT sync cable. It syncs all 8 tracks up together. Then once you record those 8 tracks, you pop your second tape in, and here's where the key comes in. You then disable recording on the first 8 tracks. I'm turning off record enable, I'm turning off monitor. Then you turn back on record enable and monitor for tracks 9 through 16 for your second tape. That allows the second tape to then sync up with the first tape. And since the computer follows the tape machine, it's going to be in sync for the second pass. While the first 8 are playing, you're going to record the next 8 at the same time. And the setup is similar to the first 8, except tracks 9 you assign back to bus 1. Track 10 you assign to bus 2. So you end up with, if you're doing 24 tracks, you end up with bus 1 being mapped to track 1, track 9, and track 17. They're all mapped to bus 1. Bus 2, which is basically the second audio input coming off the ADAT, is mapped to track 2, track 10, and track 18. and so you're only doing the 8 at a time, and so the mapping lines up each time you do each tape. So let me demonstrate that. Let's come over here. So I'm going to record, enable the first 8 tracks. Now here's one of the tricks that you have to do in order to get the tracks to line up. If you ever decide to use these tracks in another project or using another piece of software, it's just generally a good idea to do this. In the timeline, if I zoom it all the way in, I scroll to the left, you'll see that there's this shaded area, and that's because I set this marker. This is like a slidable marker. You can slide it to a point in time, and then if I hit this button here, this punch in button, it's going to punch in at this point. So right now I have it set for like 10 seconds. So I come down here, I tell my ADAT, go to 0, locate 0. It's going to locate 0 on the time code, and on my software I've got the first 8 tracks armed. I've got the monitor turned on so I can hear the 8 tracks coming through, and I've got a headphone jack also for this. Where are my headphones? I can plug the headphones directly into the 828 for monitoring, which will give me a mix in monitors, and I'll put the headphones up here so you can hear it. Okay, now I've got the ADAT's at 0. I go ahead and hit play down here, and when I do that, you're going to see this has now started to play, and I don't know if you can see that, but I've got the timeline coming across. It comes across. Now it's just recording. The punch in happened at that point, and if I scroll up, you can see the first 8 tracks are now recording. So for the punch out, you can just tell it where you want to punch out. Usually that's at the end, so that they all stop at the same point. But stopping at the same point is not that important. It's ending at the same point that's important. So we'll stop the tape, and you saw that this all happened. That disarmed itself automatically. And we'll zoom in, and here are the tracks. So here's my punch out point, and these 2 controls here on Cubase enable my punch in and punch out. So I always want to punch out, and punch in you have to always do at the beginning of each playback. You have to. It's always a 2-step process, so you don't accidentally delete over something. So now I've got the first 8 tracks. Now the key is that my punch in is still going to be at the 10-second point, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to disable recording for the first 8. This is very important. You don't want to overwrite those 8. And I'm going to enable tracks 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Then I tell my ADAT locate 0. Now I would at this point put in my second tape, because that's going to have time code matching the first tape with the new tracks in it. And I again come down here and I hit play, and I have to tell it punch in, because at the 10-second mark it's going to punch in, and you'll see it do that down here at 10 seconds. Those tracks are now recording. If you come down here, you'll see all 8 tracks. So now it's playing back those 8 and recording these 8 at the same time. And if I do nothing else and hands are off the system, when it gets to the end, it gets to the punch out point, which can be half an hour into the tape, 40 minutes into the tape, it will automatically stop recording. And I follow that same process for as many tracks as I have. I can do 32, 48, as many as I want. And that's there, and it's done. Then you hit stop on the deck. The computer stops, and now you end up with very clean. Now I've got 16 clean tracks all lined up perfectly. One other tip is if you have different bit depths on your different tapes, like I have one tape that's 20-bit, another tape that's 16-bit, you can set the bit depth in your project settings, and you can either do a 32-bit float, but that takes up a lot of extra space and may not be compatible with all software, or you can tell it to just do a 20-bit across the board, and if there's any 16-bit sources, it'll just pad the extra bits and bring them all to 20-bit, or you can just cut off a couple of bits and just have them all be 16-bit. If you have one tape like I do, I have one tape that's 20-bit and the other tapes are all 16. But that's how you do it. That's basically it. I can't think of anything else at this point to tell you or to mention. That's really it. It's very simple, very easy to do, and that's how you do it with the 828 and a single ADAT, and you can do as many tracks that you want synced. And then if you have additional tapes beyond that, well, you have to do a new project if you're going to do another set of tapes. So I have a concert I did that's an hour and a half. I did 3 tapes and then another 3 tapes, because the second set of 3 starts at timecode 0. You don't want to overwrite these, so you just create another project, save this project, create another project, erase the ones that are in there, and start again. So you end up with 2 projects for each set, but then when you're all done, those files are lined up perfectly, so you can then take them and just re-import them into one single project and have the entire show, 6 tapes, 2 sets of 3 in your software, all done through this system. Alright, thanks for watching.